right. Hey guys, this is Ryan. Welcome to our weekly coding live stream. I'm going to give just a moment and let a few other people join in real quick. But if you haven't watched last week's video on how to share your Scratch project with me, I'm going to go ahead and link that into the comments so that you can check that out at your own time. What we like to do at the beginning of all of our live streams is to showcase some work that you guys are doing and to go through some of your Scratch projects. And so today we are going to jump in right away and start talking about this Scratch project in particular. Okay, so we're looking at this Scratch project by Fred Master 45. I'll copy this project in the comments as well if you want to open it up yourself. But this particular project has a lot of good things that we're going to chat about today. And so today's topic that we are going through is going to be user interface, or UI. So whenever we say UI, we are talking about how our app or how our game interacts with the user that's using it. And games can have different user interfaces depending on how you want the user to interact with those games. And so we're going to talk about a few ways to add some buttons to our games today and a few other things. But just whenever I say UI, I'm talking about user interface. So the interface from the user to your game is what I'm talking about when we're doing that. So this particular project is called Dodging Squares by Fred Master 45 and has some notes over here. And basically, when we play this game, we click the flag, these little buttons pop up. So last week and weeks prior, whenever we click the flag, that we think that that's starting our game and making it go. Well, this particular project, the user actually set up some other buttons for you to choose. There's some instructions here. Don't touch the dark gray and dark blue squares. Collect red squares with your square, which you control by your mouse. There's a main menu button. And you notice some cool things are happening whenever you toggle over this with your mouse button. So we're going to talk about that and maybe try to replicate it in our own projects today. Then there's options, music on or off. I might turn it off for now just so that it's not distracting for what we're doing. We can erase data. So I'm not sure what that does. Main menu, and then start the game. And then it has an option for modes. So this particular user has created this interface for whoever's playing their game, this particular programmer, and they want the user to interact with the game by choosing these modes. And apparently there's a locked mode later on, which is pretty cool as well. And so we're going to see inside of this project by clicking the see inside. And we see a lot of things going on. Particularly, we see a lot of sprites down at the bottom. See all these down here? And so there are a lot of sprites, and that's actually what your button is going to end up being. When we make buttons today, they are going to end up being sprites for your project. And then we'll be able to add the code behind to make them work the way that we want them to. So let's pick a particular button. Let's pick the start game sprite. It's sprite 31 down at the bottom, and look at some of the code to see what is really going on with this project. So there's a when this sprite is clicked event listener. So this tells us whenever the sprite is clicked by the mouse, all of this stuff is going to happen down below. When I receive main menu, so something else is broadcasting out an event called main menu, and we might be able to track that down shortly as well. When I receive options, something else is sending that out. Let's see what we've got here. Looks like some of the code is not attached, but we'll still be able to figure out right there. When flag is clicked, hide. So initially we're hiding the start game button. Waiting 2 seconds, pointing in direction 90, telling it to go to, remember, we've been telling sprites where to go and which direction to face in these last few live streams. So make sure that you're doing that. And they're doing the same thing here, setting a ghost effect, go to the front layer, show, change the ghost effect. Forever wait until touching mouse pointer. And then if the mouse pointer is touched, then it will repeat 5 times, change Y by 1, repeat 5 times, change Y by -1. So the Y direction is up and down on our on the game, and that's what it looks like is happening here whenever you are hovering your mouse over this button. See how it's going up and down over and over and over again? So this is what's controlling that, this forever loop here. It says forever. I'm just going to sit there and wait until the mouse pointer is touching this particular button. And I know it's a different one. I don't have the start game brought up, but it's the same concept here. So this normal button is going up 5 times, but changing Y by 1 up, and then changing Y down and coming back to its original position. So it looks like it's bouncing up and down. And that's a good way to let the user know that they are highlighting the button that they think that they are. So yeah, nice work there. See if there's anything else that might be useful for us before we start working on our own game. Looks like this particular game has more modes. You guys can actually try to play the game and see what you think about it. But round 1 is I have to try to get the red square without the gray squares hitting me. So round 1 gets really easy. I'm hoping the game gets much more difficult later on, because it's really straightforward now. The squares are just following my mouse around, and I just have to dodge the gray ones and get the red ones. Oh, and I didn't make it, apparently. All right, so great job, FredMaster45. Remember, if you want your project featured at the beginning of these live streams, then go ahead and click that YouTube link that I have in the comments to the right and learn how to share your own Scratch project with me. But go ahead and bring up your Scratch project. So we're going to work on creating some of those buttons ourselves and creating that user interface for for the people that are going to play our game. So I'm going to create a new project from scratch. And had to reload for me just a moment there. So typically when we start the games in Scratch, at least up to this point, we have done that by clicking this green flag. And this green flag is really telling your program, hey, you can start running or you can stop. But we don't have to make our characters necessarily respond to this green flag. We can actually give some other ways to interact with our character. And it really depends on the game that you're making, right? So some games are better if you just start them and just tell the users to click the arrows. Some games you actually want them to click buttons, maybe on the side of the screen, that would help them interact with that. And so it really depends on the type of game that you're making and how you want to use that. So we're going to do a few things. We're going to actually bring out an event that says when flag is clicked. And we are going to, and this is on the cat sprite. We're not going to create any other sprite just yet. We're going to broadcast an event that just controls this entire start sequence that we want to kick off. So broadcast a new message, and we're just going to call this message start game. All right, I'm going to zoom in here. So when flag is clicked, events, broadcast, and a new message called start game. So the way this broadcast works is that we are sending out a message to every other sprite, every other object that we have within our Scratch programming environment. Broadcast means like shout it from the rooftops. We are sending a message out. And most of the sprites, unless you've programmed them to do so, at least if you haven't programmed them to do so, they're just going to ignore that message. They're like, that's fine that you're over there shouting this message out, but I don't have anything to do unless the programmer tells me to do something. And so that's when we have these when I receive start game messages. And we can put those on our other sprites. And this is how we make those other sprites listen to this broadcast that we sent from another sprite. So I'm going to bring over when I receive. And notice start game is there, the one that we just created, that we just broadcasted. When I receive start game, we're going to make our cat move 10 steps. This is really simple, but it's showing you that it still does the same thing as if the move 10 steps was right up here. Okay, so we're going to leave it the way that I had it. And so the way this code reads is when the flag is clicked, broadcast this message, start game. If anyone is actually listening to me send out this message, then run your code that's underneath of that. And that's the way this works. So let's create a button that we're going to use, and we're going to try to recreate that simulation from the example project that we looked at earlier. So we go down to choose a sprite. We're going to actually paint our own sprite. We're not going to select one from the library this time. We are going to paint. And we are going to make a button for our user. So in this instance, we're going to, you can choose whichever color you'd like for that, whichever outline you'd want for your button. But I'm going to leave the outline the way it is and choose this square. Or if you'd like a circle button, you're welcome to do that as well. And drag, click your mouse pointer and hold it down and drag to make some sort of shape. Now, obviously, that's way too big for a button on the screen, so you can resize yours by dragging on these corner circles as they come up. And that looks about right. And we want to try to get it to the center of the screen when we're creating this. That makes it a lot easier for us to maneuver later on if we need to move the button. Just some inconsistencies can happen if we don't set it right in the center of the screen. So drag it to the center of this map here, this little grid. And then you can write some text on this by clicking the T. But I want my text color to be something besides this purple, because if I put purple text on a purple square, it's not going to show up. So change your color. And then click where you want to start typing. And when you do that, this little like blue dash will come up, and so that means you can start typing in some text with your keyboard. So I'm going to type, maybe we want the cat to meow every time that we click this button. So I'm going to type in meow to make the cat do something whenever I click this button. And if you click on the text again after you've typed it, you can drag it just like we did with the square itself so that you can center it. We can resize it just like we did with the button itself. All right, and we notice that over here on the right in our workspace, we actually see the button, the size, all of the text that we wrote right on there. So you can drag your button wherever you want it to show up on the screen. I'm going to put it in the lower left-hand corner of the screen for now. All right, everybody got that? Any questions there? Anything you'd like to see me do on this one before we head on to the code? I'll give you a few seconds before we jump back into the code itself. Okay, so once we get back into the code, we notice that we have two sprites at the bottom now. One is our scratch cat, where we had some of that initial when flag is clicked, and the meow button. So we're going to do a few things, because typically when the buttons aren't showing up at the beginning, and in the project that we looked at earlier, the start game button was actually hidden at the beginning. So we're going to do that as well. Go to events, when flag is clicked, looks, and hide. So when flag is clicked, that button that we just made is hidden. Events, when I receive start game, looks, show. So this is going to make it show up right away. And you're asking, well, why did we hide it if we're just going to make it show up right away? Mainly so that everything is managed with this start game broadcast instead of some things being managed by the flag, some things being managed by other messages. We're just being consistent with our code so that it's easier for us later on if we want to track down some errors that we're having, if we want to track down some issues, we can find it in one place and hopefully resolve it there, instead of having to look at every sprite, figure out on every sprite what happened. We know that when we programmed, we're consistent with how we do that, and we've created this start game broadcast. So we've got that setting out there. So the last project that we were reviewing, it looked like anytime that you hovered over this button with your mouse, that the button itself looked like it had some effect on that. And so we're going to try to recreate that here. We're going to put a forever loop underneath of show, and that's in control. So this loop is just going to go on forever and ever. And it had a wait until at the top of that. The good thing about the wait until is it actually kind of breaks this forever loop a little bit, because it's whenever this thing happens in this until block, the code underneath of it runs, and it kind of makes the forever loop slow down a little bit, for lack of better terms. This is going forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. Wait. Oh, something happened. Let's run the code underneath of that. So that's what we're doing here. Wait until sensing touching mouse pointer. And then we had a motion blocks that were moving up, changing Y by 5, or changing Y 5 times by 1, changing Y 5 times by -1. So let's pull in a control block, repeat, and another repeat underneath of that. We're going to do that 5 times for each of those. And our other block was change Y by 1, change Y by -1. Remember, anytime we have something moving, all of those blocks are in motion. So we can click the flag, see if this is working, and we have that effect similar to what the project we were looking at earlier did. All right, so that lets the user know that, hey, I've highlighted this button. Now we're just hovering over it. We haven't clicked it yet. Once we click it, we can handle that differently. So we can do that by dragging over, going to events again, when this sprite is clicked. So when this sprite, the meow button is clicked, all of the code underneath of this is going to run. When the sprite is clicked, we're going to play a sound until done. This is over in the sound blocks. And this is something that's kind of tricky sometimes in Scratch, but you actually want to go to the record button and close this down. And the sounds, it takes you to the sound tabs at the top. That's where we want to be. The sounds are all controlled in here. We can add a new sound from the library by clicking this, just like we would a backdrop or a new sprite. Choose a sound. And there is one with a meow effect, I believe. 2 of those. I'm going to do the second one. And that brings it up into your sound library for your project. It's not added to your code yet, but we've brought that sound that we want to use inside of that. I'm going to click on the code tab at the top again. And now when you click pop in this drop down list, your Meow 2 should actually be there. So when the sprite, which is the button that we chose, we're going to play that sound until we're done. And notice that it highlights yellow every time that I click it with my mouse button. That's telling me that this section of code is running. with the yellow around it, you could tell that this section of code is running as well, because this is in that forever loop. It's continuing to run over and over again. It's waiting until the mouse pointer is touching it, and then it will hover like that. And then we can keep trying that. Okay, so that's how we would add a button to one of our games in Scratch, and then we control all the other sprites by clicking or broadcasting those messages. So maybe whenever we click the meow button, we also wanted the cat to do something itself. So from this, we can broadcast another message. And this is what I recommend. Whenever you're creating a game that has multiple sprites and you're really wanting to control the flow, sometimes the tendency is to just put timers everywhere and just wait 10 seconds and then do this, or wait 10 seconds and do this. Control it all by these broadcast messages and event listeners. That's how like when you get older and you're programming professionally, maybe that's what you end up doing. You'll create these listeners that are just waiting for something to happen. Uses a lot of resources if we're just timing it and waiting for a timer to run out before we do something. So we're going to broadcast a new message. We're going to change it from here into meow pressed. And it's very important to name these messages something that's useful for you later on. It's not, the computer doesn't care what you name it, but it's for your readability, not for the computer's sake for these messages. So meow pressed lets me know on these other sprites that, hey, that meow button was pressed. And so that it's easier for me to track down later on. Again, a lot of what we do in coding is making it easier for us to either make modifications later on or to track down any issues that we have. It's really simple. Like, we can add a lot of code and then kind of get lost, and it's really hard to track down things later on. It's important to name it right early on and name it something so that it's useful to you later on. So we go back over to our cat sprite at the bottom. When I receive meow pressed, I want my cat to turn 15 degrees in that direction. Whatever you want your cat to do. Any kind of motion that you want, or if you want them to say something and look, you can say something if you'd like, or think something. It brings up a little thought bubble. You can do that as well. Whatever you want to do with your cat, just to show that you're making something happen. So I'm clicking the green flag. Now, whenever I click this, it's going to broadcast meow pressed, and now my cat turned to 15 degrees. So we have a little interaction. We've got both sprites actually broadcasting messages, and we've got both sprites listening for messages as well, which is really, that's when you can get into some really powerful things with Sprite or with Scratch, is by broadcasting and sending those messages out to the other sprites. So are there any questions today? Anything that you guys have that you'd like to see me try to do? Because I want this to be useful to you as well. So if there's something that you're working on that you haven't quite figured out yet and you'd like to ask me, I'd love to try to tackle it for you. I can't promise that I can do everything in Scratch, but I know that I can maybe talk through some things that will help you figure it out as well. I want to choose a backdrop for my game while I'm waiting to see if anyone has any questions. Nothing there. Okay. Well, that's it for this week. Hopefully this was helpful. If you're, creating a user interface or a UI for the person that's using your game, UIs are going to be important later on. You interact with them every day, with apps that you use and with games that you play, with websites that you visit. All of these, someone's designing that UI so that the experience works for you. Do the same thing when you're actually programming your games. Think about the user using it and what things that they're going to experience when they play your games. Be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell if you want to get notified about this weekly live stream so that you get the notification, can jump on here. Remember to send your projects to us. I included the link in the comments on how to share your Scratch video. We'd really like to showcase some of the work that you're doing so that we can all learn from each other and that we can all get better at what we're doing. But I appreciate you tuning in. Thanks so much, and we will see you next week. Bye.